You think they've moved on. You think they've closed the door. You think you meant nothing to them. But let me tell you something loud and clear. Avoidants feel they just hide it better than anyone else. And what they're hiding is costing both of you more than you know. People assume that silence means indifference. That distance means detachment. That the coldness from an avoidant person is proof they never cared. But that is a lie, a dangerous lie. Because what looks like emotional distance, what sounds like I'm fine, what feels like rejection is often something far more human, far more wounded, and far more complex. So if you're wondering, do they even care? Here's what they're actually hiding. They're afraid of needing you too much. And that fear isn't rational. It's rooted deep in survival patterns. For an avoidant, needing someone feels like putting their heart in someone else's hands, and that's terrifying. It's not because they don't care. It's because they care so much that depending on you becomes a threat to their emotional stability. See, when you're close to an avoidant, something strange starts to happen. They begin to enjoy your presence. They feel safe, seen, maybe even loved. But just as they start to relax into that intimacy, an alarm goes off in their nervous system. That alarm says, wait, this is dangerous. If I get used to this, I could get hurt. If I rely on this, I might lose it, and I don't survive loss. So what do? They pull back, not because they want to, but because their subconscious has learned that connection is risky. And here's the part most people don't understand. The more they like you, the more afraid they become. The deeper the bond, the louder the internal panic. This isn't about you. This isn't about anything you did wrong. This is about the way they've been wired to survive. They've probably never told you this. Maybe they don't even realize it consciously. But when they start needing you emotionally, when they start to depend on your presence, your voice, your support, it activates something in them that screams, this is too much. I'm losing control. And for an avoidant, control equals safety. So instead of saying, I care about you, they distance. Instead of saying, I miss you, they go silent. Instead of asking for closeness, they create space. Because the closer you get, the more real their vulnerability becomes. And for someone who equates vulnerability with danger, that's unbearable. They'll tell themselves they're being logical. That space is good. That they're just not ready. But what's really happening is emotional overload. They're drowning in feelings they don't know how to manage, so they retreat. Not to punish you, but to protect themselves. Ironically, it's in the moment they start needing you the most that they run the fastest. This is why you can feel so rejected when, in truth, you're the one person they feel safest and most afraid to need. Their childhood taught them that love equals pain, and that belief becomes the blueprint for every relationship they build as adults. It's not always dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it comes from subtle emotional neglect, cold parents, or inconsistent affection that conditioned them to associate closeness with discomfort. When you grow up learning that love is unpredictable, conditional, or unsafe, you internalize one core message. If I get too close, I'll get hurt. So now, even when you show them real love, even when you're consistent, kind, and emotionally available, they don't trust it. Not because of anything you've done wrong, but because their nervous system is trained to expect that love will eventually hurt, that it will disappear, that it will betray them. So instead of leaning in, they brace for the fall. As a child, maybe they reached out and no one responded. Maybe they expressed emotion and got punished, mocked, or ignored. Maybe they only received love when they performed well, stayed quiet, or didn't make waves. Over time, that child begins to believe, my feelings don't matter. My needs are a problem. And if I want to be loved, I have to hide who I really am. That belief doesn't just vanish with age. It becomes embedded in how they relate to people, especially those who try to love them. That's why, when you get close to an avoidant, they often flinch at your tenderness. They don't know how to receive it. In fact, your affection may trigger a deeply buried memory, not a conscious one, but an emotional one that tells them this ends badly. And that's the tragedy. They want connection. They crave intimacy. But the second it shows up, they start preparing for it to be taken away. And so they sabotage it before it can hurt them. You might notice that when you're distant or busy, they feel safer, not because they don't want you, but because distance feels familiar. It mirrors the emotional absence they grew up with. On the flip side, when you move toward them with love, consistency, or emotional availability, it feels foreign, unsafe, confusing. They've never known that kind of closeness without pain attached, so part of them assumes there must be a catch. This is what makes loving an avoidant so painful and confusing. You're offering them what they always needed, but their childhood taught them it's a trap, and until they begin to heal that original wound, they'll keep pushing away the very thing their heart is starving for. They replay the relationship in their head over and over, but you'd never know it. Avoidants don't process emotions the way others do. Instead of reaching out, talking through their feelings, or expressing vulnerability openly, they internalize everything, silently, sacredly, obsessively. They sit with the words you said, the look on your face, the tone in your voice, not just once, but 1,000 times in quiet moments when no one's watching. To the outside world, they seem detached, calm, maybe even cold, but inside there's a storm of thoughts they don't know how to express. They think about the last conversation you had. They remember the way you looked at them when you were disappointed or when you smiled at them with love. They recall your laughter, your scent, your kindness, and then immediately try to suppress it because feeling too much is overwhelming. And yet they can't help themselves. Because despite all their efforts to detach, they do feel deeply. They just don't know what to do with those feelings once they rise. So they try to analyze them, contain them, control them. But the truth is, when an avoidant misses you or is hurt by you or even still loves you, they don't tell you. They talk to themselves about it. They go back in time and replay moments on a loop, trying to figure out if they were too much, not enough, too vulnerable, too exposed. What makes this even more complicated is that avoidants struggle with emotional safety. Opening up doesn't feel safe, even to the person they care about. So instead of a message, you get silence. Instead of closure, you get confusion. But make no mistake, they're thinking about you. They just believe that if they let you know, they'll lose control. And for someone whose sense of security is built around self-reliance, losing emotional control is terrifying. Sometimes they rehearse conversations they wish they had, things they wish they could say but don't know how. I miss you. I'm sorry. I cared more than I showed, but the words get stuck. Their pride, their fear, and their conditioning build a wall that feels impossible to climb over. So they go silent not because they've moved on, but because the emotional processing is happening behind locked doors you're not allowed to open. And that's what most people never see. The avoidant's heart isn't empty. It's just locked away where they think no one can hurt it. But behind those walls, the memories still echo. You still echo. They push you away to feel in control, not because they don't care, but because emotional closeness threatens the fragile balance they've worked their whole lives to maintain. For an avoidant, control is their emotional oxygen. It keeps them feeling safe, grounded, and protected from the chaos they associate with vulnerability. The moment emotions start to rise, the moment love begins to deepen, they instinctively pull back, not out of malice, but out of fear. When an avoidant starts to feel something real, their nervous system goes into overdrive. It's not logical, it's survival. The closeness you offer, the affection you show, the intimacy you build, all of that feels like unfamiliar territory. To someone who's learned to survive by staying emotionally independent, your presence begins to feel like a threat, not because of who you are, but because of what you represent, the loss of control. So they do what they've always done. They retreat. They say they need space. They shut down, go quiet, or become distant. Not because they've stopped feeling, but because the feelings are becoming too much. And to them, too much, too dangerous. Pushing you away is a way to self-regulate, to breathe, to remind themselves that they're still in control of their emotional environment. This dynamic is especially confusing for the person on the other side, because things might have been going well. You laughed together. You connected. You started to feel close. And then, out of nowhere, they withdrew. What most people don't understand is that to an avoidant, losing control of their emotions feels like falling into a black hole. It feels like becoming dependent, and dependency in their world is associated with pain, disappointment, or even abandonment. So pushing you away isn't personal. It's their way of restoring order. It's their defense mechanism. They don't want to be seen falling apart. They don't want to admit they're scared. So instead, they regain emotional dominance by becoming cold or distant. This way, they don't have to feel exposed. They don't have to admit they care more than they're comfortable with. In their mind, taking distance is safer than risking emotional collapse. But what they often fail to realize is that in trying to protect themselves from pain, they often cause it for you and for themselves, because deep down they don't actually want to push you away. They're just scared of what it means to let you fully in. They hate hurting you. They truly do, but they don't know how to show up when it matters most. This is one of the most misunderstood traits of someone with an avoidant attachment style. People often assume that their silence, their withdrawal, or their emotional distance means they don't care. But that couldn't be further from the truth. The problem isn't a lack of care. The problem is an overload of emotions they were never taught how to handle. Avoidants are not emotionally numb. They are emotionally overwhelmed. And because they were never given the tools to process that overwhelm in a healthy way, they default to shutting down. Think of it like an overloaded circuit. When too much emotion surges through their system, the breaker trips and they disconnect. Not to hurt you, but to survive the intensity of what they're feeling. And in those moments, even though they may seem calm on the surface, there's often a storm inside. They know you're hurt. They know their silence is painful. They might even feel guilty for the way they've pulled away. But instead of coming forward and saying, "I'm sorry," or "I'm struggling," they retreat deeper. Why? Because admitting emotional failure feels like exposing a wound they've spent their entire life trying to hide. Many avoidants grew up in environments where emotional expression was met with punishment, ridicule, or neglect. So now, as adults, they don't trust emotional situations, especially when they feel like they've disappointed someone. Conflict, vulnerability, and emotional accountability all trigger the same deep fear. If I show up emotionally, I'll mess it up. I'll be rejected. I'll be exposed. So they stay silent, even though it hurts both of you. You might be waiting for them to reach out, to take responsibility, to offer an explanation. But inside, they're stuck in a loop of avoidance and shame. They care. They just don't know how to show it in the moments that matter most. And the more pressure they feel to get it right, the more they shut down. Their silence is not a sign of apathy. It's often a symptom of emotional paralysis. Ironically, while they are trying not to hurt you, they end up doing exactly that. Not because they want to cause pain, but because the only way they've ever learned to protect themselves is to disconnect. And until they learn how to stay present in discomfort, they'll keep disappearing in the moments you need them the most. They secretly want you to break through the walls, even though they'll never admit it out loud. In fact, the more an avoidant pushes you away, the more likely it is that, deep down, they're hoping you won't leave. It's a paradox they live with every day. I need you to stay, but I don't know how to let you in. This internal conflict makes them seem cold or uninterested on the outside, but inside, there's often a quiet desperation for connection that they're terrified to reveal. Avoidants crave love just like anyone else. They long to feel understood, valued, and safe. But what sets them apart is the fear that opening up will lead to pain, loss, or rejection. So they build walls, not because they want to keep you out, but because those walls have kept them emotionally safe for years. It's how they learn to survive a world where vulnerability often led to being hurt. Yet behind those barriers, there's a part of them silently hoping that someone, maybe you, will be strong enough to see through the defenses and patient enough to stay. This is why avoidants often test people, sometimes without realizing it. They might create distance, delay responses, or act indifferent just to see, will you give up on me too? It's not a game. It's a survival strategy. They've learned not to trust love at face value because in the past, love has felt like a trap. So when you get close, their instincts scream, this can't be real. They'll leave like everyone else. And they push you away to see if their fears are right. But deep down, there's still hope. Hope that you'll prove them wrong. Hope that someone will finally see past the tough exterior and stay. That you won't be scared off by the silence, that you won't interpret their distance as a lack of feeling. They might never ask for help. They might never say, I need you, but they want it deeply. They want you to knock on the door they've locked shut, even as they pretend not to hear it. What makes this so hard is that the very thing they need, emotional consistency and patience, is often what their behavior seems to push away. But if you've ever felt like an avoidant was sending mixed signals, it's because they are. Not out of manipulation, but out of fear. Because while they act like they don't care if you leave, they're secretly hoping you won't. They're at war with themselves, constantly torn between the part of them that wants love and the part of them that fears it. This internal battle is exhausting, confusing, and deeply painful, not just for the avoidant, but for anyone trying to love them. One moment they seem open, warm, even vulnerable. The next they're cold, distant, and unreachable. It's not because they're playing games. It's because they're battling two powerful forces inside themselves that are pulling in opposite directions. On one side, there's a deep craving for connection. They want to be close. They want to feel safe with someone. They want to love and be loved. This part of them longs for intimacy, for emotional safety, for a relationship where they don't have to hide who they are. But on the other side is fear. A primal, protective fear that says, if you get too close, you'll lose yourself, you'll be hurt, you'll be abandoned. This fear doesn't just whisper, it screams. And in moments when emotions rise or love feels too real, the fear often wins. This is the core of the avoidant dilemma. They don't just avoid others. They avoid themselves. They suppress their needs, deny their feelings, and run from their own emotional truth. And every time they start to feel something real, that inner war intensifies. Part of them says, this is what I've always wanted, while the other part shouts, you can't handle this, get out before it's too late. So they retreat, not because they want to lose you, but because they don't know how to live with the emotional chaos inside. To make matters worse, avoidants often feel ashamed of this conflict. They know their behavior doesn't make sense. They're aware that they're sending mixed signals. But they don't know how to stop it. They might even beat themselves up afterward, after ghosting you, after snapping during a vulnerable moment, after pulling away just when things were getting good. They regret it. But their fear feels stronger than their desire. This inner war creates a cycle: get close, feel overwhelmed, pull away, miss you, repeat. And every time the cycle happens, it reinforces the belief that they're incapable of healthy connection, which only makes them more guarded the next time, until they face that internal war directly, until they begin healing the parts of themselves that believe love is dangerous. They will continue to sabotage the very thing they most deeply want. They do care deeply, but fear makes them act like they don't. This is the heartbreaking truth about avoidantly attached individuals. They often feel more than they're willing or able to express. On the outside, they appear calm, detached, even indifferent. They might ignore your messages, seem unaffected by your absence, or walk away as if you never mattered. But inside, there's often a quiet ache, a buried longing, a constant inner tension they don't know how to handle. Caring deeply is not easy for them. It's terrifying, because to care is to risk. To love is to be vulnerable. And to an avoidant, vulnerability feels like stepping into enemy territory. It's unpredictable, overwhelming, and unsafe. So instead of leaning in, they lean out. Instead of expressing how they feel, they hide behind silence. And yet, even as they retreat, they're watching, they're thinking, they're feeling. They just don't want you to see it. Their emotional shutdown is not an absence of love. It's a defense against the intensity of it. They've learned, often from early experiences, that emotional exposure leads to pain, disappointment, or rejection. So now, even when someone comes along who's safe and genuine, that old fear still drives their behavior. They tell themselves, if I act like I don't care, I can't be hurt. If I don't show emotion, I won't lose control. But the truth is, the act of hiding becomes its own prison. And here's the most painful irony: the more they care, the more they try to conceal it. The closer you get, the harder they work to maintain distance. They'll suppress the urge to reach out. They'll silence the voice that wants to say, I miss you. They'll convince themselves that pushing you away is better than risking their heart. But all the while, they're feeling deeply, silently, and alone. This is why being close to an avoidant can feel so confusing. You sense there's something underneath the surface, but you're met with walls. You feel a connection, but they won't acknowledge it. You experience moments of closeness, only to have them pull away again. It makes you question everything, but what you're seeing is not a lack of feeling. It's fear masquerading as indifference. Avoidants don't shut down because they don't care. They shut down because caring makes them feel powerless, exposed, and out of control. And unless they learn to confront that fear, they will continue to love from a distance while pretending they never felt a thing at all. So now you know, the avoidant you thought didn't care, the one who walked away, went silent, or pushed you out, they weren't heartless. They weren't empty. They were scared. Scared of needing someone too much, scared of repeating the pain they felt long before you ever entered their life. And when that fear was triggered, they did what they were wired to do: retreat, protect, and disconnect. Not because you didn't matter, but because you mattered more than they could handle. And that's the most painful truth of all. Behind the coldness was care. Behind the silence was emotional chaos. Behind the wall was a heart that simply didn't know how to stay open and safe at the same time. They aren't villains. They're survivors. People who grew up believing that love was dangerous, that closeness was unpredictable, and that needing someone would only end in abandonment. Their coping mechanisms were built to protect them. But over time, those same defenses became prisons, keeping them from the very intimacy they craved. And if you've been on the other side of this, if you've loved someone with an avoidant attachment style, you've felt the heartbreak of loving someone who can't always love you back in the way you need, not because they don't want to, but because they don't know how. But now you have a choice. You can stop personalizing their withdrawal. You can stop believing their silence was proof of your unworthiness. You can see the bigger picture, that their behavior was never about you. It was about old wounds, old patterns, and a nervous system that equates safety with distance. And in understanding that, you begin your own healing. You reclaim your peace. You stop chasing their potential and start honoring your own heart. Compassion doesn't mean self-sacrifice. You can care deeply for someone and still choose to protect your own emotional well-being. And for the avoidants themselves, if you're listening, know this: you are not broken. You are not incapable of love. But you do have to be honest with yourself. You have to stop hiding behind emotional independence and start facing the fear that's been driving your disconnection. Love is not supposed to feel like losing yourself. Real connection isn't a threat. It's a mirror, one that reflects the parts of you that still need healing. The relationship will not save you, but it can be the space where you finally stop running from yourself. In the end, the truth is this: avoidants do care. They just don't always show it in the ways you expect. But beneath all the detachment, the fear, the distance, there is a human being who wants love, just like everyone else. The difference is, they've spent so long protecting themselves from hurt that they've forgotten how to let it in. Healing is possible. Connection is possible. But it starts with awareness, accountability, and the courage to feel fully, honestly, and without running away. Because the love you're afraid of, it might just be the love that sets you free. Thank you for watching. If this message spoke to your heart, if it gave you clarity, comfort, or strength, know that it was meant for you. Every like, every share, every comment helps this message reach someone else who might be silently struggling. So if this resonated, don't keep it to yourself. Pass it on. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. We're building something powerful here, a space for truth, healing, and real connection. Until next time, take care of your heart. You deserve love that doesn't run and healing that lasts. Goodbye for now, and remember, just because they're silent doesn't mean they don't feel.